Hello, my name is Schmitt. I'm a dermatologist and researcher from Germany, and with a large team we undertook a cohort study on the relationship between UV exposure acquired at work and the risk for squamous cell carcinoma of the skin. And today I want to explain the background and the main findings and what they mean. Skin cancer, particularly squamous cell carcinoma, is caused by solar UV exposure, as you probably all know, and therefore public health prevention strategies focus on the reduction of UV exposure. However, many people acquire UV exposure at work, not only at leisure time, and substantial exposures can be acquired at work. So that the research question was, to what extent does UV exposure at work, occupational UV exposure, determine the risk for squamous cell carcinoma of the skin? We undertook a large multi-center case control study in several study sites in Germany. And we recruited population-based cases with incident squamous cell carcinoma of the skin and population-based controls through the registration offices. Cases and controls were matched by age and sex, so that we had a comparable study population. We then assessed lifetime UV exposure and known other risk factors for skin cancer, such as intake of immunosuppressants, for example, or artificial UV exposure. The one important aspect of the study is that we used validated instruments to measure UV exposure at work and outside work at leisure time, and the lack of a good use of a good instrument for UV exposure assessment was a major limitation of previous studies. Main results of the study is that people with a total lifetime UV exposure of more than 19,600 SED had a more than twofold increased risk for squamous cell carcinoma compared to individuals with low exposure, and we could show that we could replicate previous studies that indicate UV exposure as a major risk factor for squamous cell carcinoma. However, our study is among the first to show that it's particularly UV exposure acquired at work that predetermines squamous cell carcinoma risk. In our study, non-occupational UV exposure was not significantly related to incident squamous cell carcinoma. Another very important and novel aspect of our study is that we were the first to show a clear dose-response relationship between UV exposure in general, but also UV exposure at work and the risk for squamous cell carcinoma. We believe that the study is important, and therefore it's well appreciated that the British Journal of Dermatology publishes this study, because it indicates that we have to consider to broaden the focus of public health prevention strategies to the workplace, not only the avoidance of UV exposure at leisure time, but also at work is important. And also health policy has now to consider to implement squamous cell carcinoma through occupationally acquired UV exposure as an occupational disease, which was done in Germany and a few other countries, but there are many countries that still do not consider squamous cell carcinoma as a work-related disease, and therefore the study is also not only important for physicians and researchers, but also for health policy and decision makers. So this is a short summary of the paper. Thanks.